What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another Fall Obsession podcast episode. My name is Sam Thrash. I'm the show host over here. Thank you all for tuning in. You guessed it. We're still talking whitetails here on Fall Obsession podcast. We're trying to finish the 24-25 whitetail hunting season strong with having some awesome folks on our show that have had an interesting and a great 2024 season. And this week we have none other than Chad Jones on our show. He is our Southern Regional Coordinator over here at Fall Obsession, a valued member of our team, and very, very knowledgeable when it comes to hunting big Texas whitetails. And we talk about just that. We talk about some of the stories and the experiences that Chad had this hunting season, both for himself and for his daughters, getting his daughters on some whitetail bucks, including his youngest, her very first whitetail. So some awesome stuff when it comes to that. Chad also talks with us just about his hunting tactics in Texas in general, as well as some of his coveted secrets for getting on some hunting leases down here in the Lone Star State, which is no easy feat. When it comes to that, you definitely got to grind for it. So great podcast, great episode as always with Chad, and I hope you guys enjoy it. But before I turn it over to the episode, got to hit a few high points real quick, and the first one is with Hoot Camo. Hoot Camo is a partner with us over here at Fall Obsession. They're a Texas-based brand, and they make high-quality camouflage and camo gear for the blue-collar hunter. And just because they're Texas-based, don't let that discourage you. They work in a ton of different environments. I myself have worn their camo not just in Texas, but in the flatland plains of eastern Colorado, in the mountains of central Idaho, on multiple different hunting trips, and the gear is phenomenal. It's high quality, it's warm, holds up against the elements very well, and the patterns are very versatile. They adapt to different environments. I absolutely love my Hoot gear, and you guys are going to love the price point if you are getting into a brand new high quality set of camouflage. You can go on their website, hootcamo.com, compare those prices to the high quality gear that other name brands are selling, and you guys will see the difference. They're worth it. They'll save you some money. Again, if you are looking to get into a high quality set of camouflage that is going to last you. Go check out Hoot Camo today. They have more than just camo. They also have everyday lifestyle wear, fishing gear, just all the hats and shirts and all that kind of stuff. And if you use the code FALLOBSESSION15 at checkout, that's going to save you guys some money. Go check them out today, Hoot Camo and hootcamo.com. Bear River Archery is a proud partner and the official archery shop of Fall Obsession. So if you guys are local to the North Texas area and you have not gone up to Van Alstyne and checked out Justin and everything that he's doing up there with Bear River Archery, you need to go do it. They got an awesome setup. They will get you guys taken care of. Let them know that Fall Obsession sent you, and go check out Bear River Archery. Trophy Edits is a Fall Obsession partner. I'm sure that we have all had that photo in the past from a memorable moment in the woods, a memorable hunt, and you take the picture, you're looking forward to taking a quick peek at it and reminiscing on that memory, and when you lay eyes on it, the photo just doesn't do the moment justice. Maybe the lighting was wrong, it was too dark, maybe it was a little blurry, whatever it might be. The Trophy Edits team are a bunch of professional guys that will clean up those images and make that memory the most it can be for you. Head on over to the link in this podcast description. That will let them know that you guys came from us. We appreciate that. And check out everything that Trophy Edits does and see if they can do anything for you. The Outdoor Call radio app is a Fall Obsession podcast partner, and you can hear our podcast streaming on the Outdoor Call radio app every single Monday. The Outdoor Call radio app has a ton of different hunting shows and podcasts that we all know and love, including our show, and they just stream on a loop every single day with different shows playing daily on that app. It is free to download. You can download it in your app store on your iPhone or whatever you Android users prefer to use. You can find it in your app store, your version of that is. A little jab at you there, sorry. But the Outdoor Call radio app is an awesome thing that Outdoors Dan has created. Go check it out today and download it for free. Last but not least, Ridge Rock Hunt Company and Derek Eves. They are the folks you guys need to talk to if you want to book a North American hunt with a vetted and trusted outfitter. Derek has nothing but vetted and trusted outfitters in his network from across the country. Anything you want to hunt, he will get you fixed up, get you set up with all the right details and everything. Let Derek do the hard work for you when you're booking your next hunt, and use Ridge Rock Hunt Company. Finally, thank you guys again for listening to another Fall Obsession podcast. Whatever podcast app or platform you're streaming this episode on, I'm going to ask you guys to do us a quick favor and hit that follow or subscribe button, whatever they have up there for you. Turn your notifications on if that's an option. That way you know every time we drop a new podcast episode. If you like the show, please leave us a review. We always appreciate that. Head on over to our YouTube channel. You can find not just our podcast episodes and the podcast videos on the YouTube, but you can also find all the different shows and hunting films that we produce over here at Fall Obsession, and we have a lot in our editing room right now that we are about to start releasing. So you guys don't want to miss that. So be sure you are subscribed to the Fall Obsession YouTube channel. Again, notifications are turned on. Hit us up on all of the major social media platforms. We are on all of those platforms, posting daily hunting and outdoor content and experiences from our staff across the country. And then fallobsession.com is the website. You guys can head on over there and check it out, see everything we got going on, pick up a hat or a shirt if you're so inclined and want to support a small-time hunting brand. We always appreciate that. And finally, if you guys are not familiar with the Carbon TV platform, it's like Netflix for hunting basically, and you will find 4 different shows that Fall Obsession produces on the Carbon TV streaming platform. This podcast is on there, as well as our staff-inspired video podcast series called Couch Chats, and we have 2 different hunting shows on Carbon TV titled Texas Dirt and Midwest Mindset. You're going to want to check them out. Download the Carbon TV app to your phone, your tablet, your smart TV, or just pull it up in a browser on your computer and start streaming today for free. With that, I hope you guys are ready to talk a little bit more whitetails with me and this week's guest, Chad Jones. You guys are listening to another Fall Obsession podcast.
Oh, you got her, dude. She's down. Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. Another Fall Obsession podcast. Got a awesome guest with me recording this week. He's a Texas guy. He's a whitetail guy. He's our Southern Regional Coordinator here at Fall Obsession, Chad Jones. Welcome back to the show, man.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you having me on, as always.
Yeah, it's always a good time, man. I enjoy sitting down and talking whitetails. We've been doing a whole lot of it around this time this year, it seems like. And you, I'm just going to dive right in, man. You had, from the looks of it, a pretty awesome season. So talk to us about 2024, man, and what it brought for you in the Lone Star State.
Well, kind of going into the season, my goal was set regardless, what bucks I was kind of getting through the summer before they really started developing. My goal was, I want to get both of my girls tagged out, because my oldest daughter, Chloe, she's been hunting with me for 6 years now. I mean, she's 16 and started hunting with me when she was 10. And so she got her first deer when she was 10, and she shot a deer every year since then. And so I wasn't so concerned about her. She kind of knows the drill, what to do. But my youngest, she was like, Dad, I want to hunt with you this year. And so now she's a little more impatient. She's 11, and she's a little more impatient. So I was like, well, we'll kind of have to see how this pans out, because obviously hunting in Collin County, we don't have high numbers of deer. And so it's, trying to explain to her, hey, we might not see a whole lot. So anyway, so started out in the summer. I had some really nice bucks on camera. I've got multiple properties. Not all of them produce year to year. So I'm just kind of bouncing around, putting out some corn, some minerals, planting food plots on areas that I know should be relatively good late season, just typical preseason prep stuff. And started getting some really good shooters on camera on one of my spots. And I don't really get too up in arms about it early on, because I know a lot of those deer will disperse, go to fall ranges, kind of start splitting up. So I was like, we'll see how it goes. But anyway, so season rolls in. My girls, since Collin County's archery only, they have to wait until general season starts. And so they actually shoot what's called an airbow, like a Benjamin airbow. It's 3,000 psi of compressed air, but shoots an arrow. So it basically falls kind of in the same criteria as a crossbow. So they can't use those until general season here in Collin County, Grayson County, Rockwall, and Dallas County.
Gotcha.
So they had to wait until first weekend of November to go hunt. So I kind of thought, all right, well, October will be my time frame. I'll get in there. I didn't have any shooters daylighting, so I didn't even go hunt until the week of Halloween. And I was supposed to go to Kansas that week. My buddy had called me, said, man, I don't have anything daylighting because, it was unusually hot this year. And anyway, and so I postponed it. I said, well, I'll go middle of November back up to Kansas. And so I start kind of putting in a little more time here. And middle of November rolls around, and I call him a week before, and he's like, dude, I don't have anything over 140 showing up. And he's got some really big deer up there. And he was same deal. He's like, man, it's unusually hot, all the movements at night. And I'm like, and I'm not driving 12 hours, to go just shoot anything. And
right.
so I was like, well, I'll wait until a little bit later season, right before, early December. Hopefully they've had some major cold snaps, starts forcing deer to some feed. And so I kind of focused all my time and energy back, because at this point now my girls, could hunt. So I go in right before Thanksgiving and take Chloe with me. I think we hunted 3 times. She ended up shooting a really nice 9-point on our third sit. And then Blakely, and then I went a couple days later, and then I ended up shooting my buck. And then I went and hunted a few times with Blakely with no success. And of course, she's just like, Dad, where's the deer at? Because if there's no deer showing up in 5 minutes, she's already bored and wanting to move on. I explained to her, I said, baby, we just don't have a lot of deer. I said, it's not like a feeder goes off, because we weren't even hunting over feeders. We were just doing hand scattered corn. And so, she was just like, I could tell she was kind of getting burnt out on it. But we had one really nice 9-point that I had passed actually on a few sits. And I was like, man, I'm going to pass him next year. He could be incredible. And but this particular property, I had some local developers come in. They started doing soil samples, and so I already knew what that message was sending. Is I was like, this place ain't going to be around much longer. Plus I've got housing development all around me, so I could hear the construction workers out singing, like hammering on like right by me.
Wow.
And so I was like, man, this is going to be short-lived. And so the more I thought about it, I was like, man, this deer, because I didn't really have any other hunters. There were only 2 other hunters I knew of about a mile away. So it's a good spot in terms of a sanctuary. But, I was like, these deer could get hit by a car. They, get killed, injured. Something could happen to them. So I was like, man, this will be the perfect deer for my daughter if I can get her on this deer. Because he was a big mature deer. And so anyway, I kept noticing on trail cameras that, like, on a south wind, he would get on the downwind side of this little draw that I'm on. And so he would scent check for the does on the downwind side of it. And then when we'd have a north wind, he'd do the opposite. He'd go to the other side, do the downwind side. And so I kind of looked at the weather. I saw on a Saturday morning, the wind was going to shift out of the south. And so I told Blakely, I said, hey, it's going to shift out of the south overnight, but you're going to have to go and hunt in the morning with me, because she'd been hunting afternoons. They're not really morning girls. And anyway, and so she's like, okay, Dad, what time we got to get up? And I said, well, we'll probably have to get up about 4 o'clock. So we got to, get in there, get early, get everything, let it all settle down in the woods. And anyway, and so she got up. She was a trooper. She was ready to roll. And so anyway, we drive in on the field, and I always take my thermal with me so I can scan to see if there's any deer on the field, because the last thing I want to do is blow them out, and then we're basically sitting there for nothing. Well, sure enough, I can see 8 deer on the field. Of course, thermal, I couldn't tell what they were, but one of the bucks or one of the deer had his head down and he was seeking behind some of the others. So I was like, all right, that's for sure a buck. And I was like, and I have a feeling that might be the one we're after. And so I told my daughter, I said, well, let's do this. Let's just sit in the car for a little bit, see if they'll kind of work their way off the field. And we sit there probably 20 minutes, and they're not moving. They're just eating, kind of browsing around some winter wheat. And so I said, well, here's what we'll do. I said, they're so used to construction workers' trucks in and out all the time. I said, I'll just drive my truck in towards them until it slowly pushes them off the field. Then when it does, well, I'll pull my truck in, park it over the hill where they can't see it, and then we'll slip back into the pop-up blind. So that's what we do. We watch them. They all clear the field. They kind of go off in this creek, so I knew they couldn't look back and see me. And so we do that. I go park the truck, take off, get in the pop-up blind, and probably about an hour later, she's sitting there playing Tetris or Minecraft or something on her phone. I don't know if she was bored. And anyway, and I look up, and the buck we're after, this big 9, was literally 10 yards in front of us. And of course, we couldn't hear him coming because it's a plowed field next to us. And so, I mean, it was dead silent. I just happened to look right through the hole of the blind, or the window of the blind, and he's literally standing right there. But luckily, he was looking the other way. And but he did the exact same thing. He came on the downwind side, and I actually set the pop-up blind farther downwind, thinking that's probably what he was going to do. And so that way he wouldn't wind us. And he literally come right beside us, and he turns, he walks up there, and I had some hand scattered corn on the ground just to stop him. And so he goes up there, takes a couple bites. I get Blakely all set up, ready to go. And she made a really good shot. He was kind of quartering away from us just a little bit, but she tucked right behind the shoulder. But I guess the way his shoulder was back, she kind of clipped right at like the back part of the shoulder and the tendon. And so it didn't get a lot of penetration. I watched the arrow break and fall out. And but there was quite a bit of blood coming out. And so we track it to probably about 150 yards. And I could tell he was going down to this creek, which I knew that's kind of the area he's bedding in. And so I was like, hey, let's just back out. I don't want to push it, especially this has been her first deer.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, I don't want to take any chances. I was like, because, if he's still alive and able to run, we might push him across the highway. I mean, he could go anywhere. And I said, so let's just back out. We ended up calling Ricky Loftus, deer tracker, and he came out a few hours later. And of course, his dog gets on the blood instantly, goes down there. We're all listening, and we hear the dog start barking, going crazy. I was like, so what does it mean if they bark? I was like, is that just they find them? He goes, no, it means it's alive. And I was like, oh boy. So so we walked down there, and the buck was bedded on the side of the creek, but facing back the way we were. So if we would have walked farther down there, he would have gotten blown out. Yeah. So we made the right call. But anyway, so the dog gets on him, kind of runs him all around. He's trying to gore the dog. And I mean, it was pretty intense. And anyway, so finally get in there, get a shot at him, get him put down. And, and I told Blakely, I was like, you don't understand what you've done. Cause I mean, I'm guessing we're waiting on the score, cause we need a 60-day drying period, but I'm guessing he's right at 150, wow. Maybe low 150s. And, anyway, and I said, Blakely, there's grown men that hunt their whole life and never shoot a deer like that.
Yeah.
Some never even see a deer like that. And I said, so you can't, that expectation, I said, you can't expect to kill a deer like this every time.
Yeah.
And, so I showed her I showed her the antlers I have of my first deer, which is like a little dude. He's maybe like, I don't know, 30 inches. Little 7 point out of Davy Crockett National Forest when I was 10, or yeah, 10, 9, 10, somewhere around there. And anyway, and so it was incredible, man. I mean, there was obviously it's great when we have success, but to see my girls have success, and especially to experience them getting their first deer, and just the look on her face and the excitement. I mean, and you just see like what wasn't really a passion. It was just kind of like okay, let's go do it because dad does it and sister does it and whatever. To where she was just like, Dad, that was awesome. She looked at me, she's like, I was shaking so bad. And I was like, yeah, that's buck fever. I said, that's why we do it. I said, man, we chase that rush, and man, it was a cool moment, because obviously I was with my oldest daughter for her first buck, and now having my youngest daughter, her first buck. It doesn't get much better than that, man. So even if I wouldn't have shot anything, it was a perfect season for me.
Absolutely, man. That's awesome. Incredible moment for sure. I wanted to ask you a little bit, and I won't dive too deep into it just yet because I want to talk to you just about some of your hunting tactics and everything like that. But you referenced a couple times in that story the hand scattered corn. So in that particular location, I know you don't use feeders very much. So I wanted to ask what was the setup like, and why was that the spot where you put your blind and that you were hunting specifically?
Well, so I run so many cameras, it's ridiculous. But I've got cameras on. I try to think of not just early season, where the deer are going to be and where they're going to move, but I also think of where they're going to move, cruising areas looking for does. And so I knew this patch of woods in this draw. I actually had cameras in the draw where there's kind of some open hardwoods in there, and it was kind of a down off in a little bit of a ravine. I had put the cameras in there early summer, and it was literally the bucks bedding area. I mean, I had these bucks all hours of the day, every single day. And they were in the bachelor group, and all 5 of them were shooters. And so then I was kind of stuck because I was like, well, now I can't go in there and do anything because the bucks were in there. Mm-hmm. And so, and the way the land is, it's just a long strip of timber, but there's no other woods around me. So it kind of pigeonholes because the development's basically bulldozed it all down.
Yeah.
So I'm in a great spot. I've got water, I've got food, I've got cover. And the drawback for me was, how do I get in and hunt it if the deer are bedding in there, And so one of the tactics for me was, I was just like, all right, well, I got to stay on the outside perimeter of it, because if I dive in there into their bedding area, it could be game over. So I didn't plan to do that. So like early season, even though one of the bucks was in there, he was probably in the mid 170s. I probably would have shot him. And then the buck I ended up shooting this year was also in that same group. I didn't have a whole lot of pictures of him. It was kind of weird. He wasn't in the original bachelor group at first. He was just kind of sporadic. Really old deer, real reclusive, never had like a running mate. And so I knew those deer were in there. I was getting pictures of them all the time during October, but mainly only at night. Or I would get them, I'd get 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock in the afternoon pictures, but I could tell they were bedding, they were just in there because that's where they're bedding. And I'm like, man, it's hot, wind's blowing, I'm going to smell. I don't know exactly where they're bedding in there. So trying to figure out how to get in there without blowing them out, because I might get one chance and it's over. And so I just waited. I just stayed out of it. I hunted some other properties because I was like, where are they going to go? And so I waited until we started getting closer to the rut. That way it started dispersing some of the deer, some of them getting drug off, and, pinned down with does. And so just started hunting the perimeter of the of the edges. And then the buck started getting where now they went from kind of the interior woods to where they were cruising the perimeter edges, making scrapes on them, going down the downwind side of the draw, checking for does and stuff like that. And so basically I positioned my stands, and I did the same thing for my daughters, positioned her pop-up blind. So basically, like from where the tree line is, all the scrapes are right at the edge of it, and their trail is running, a few feet from the edge of the wood line. And so I basically took my pop-up blind and went 25 yards downwind, past that.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the same thing. I had a setup on the other side, so that way I could hunt each wind, but just opposite winds.
Yeah.
And but like if it was a true west wind, I was out of the game. True east wind, I was out of the game. But I don't, it was kind of one of those things to, you just have to figure out how to hunt the property, because each property is different. And so anyway, that was the setup for that one. So I ended up shooting my buck, same deal. He come down the downwind side, and I was actually hunting a different property that morning, and my phone was going off, and the buck I shot, he was like an 8-year-old deer.
Wow.
Heavy mass, wasn't crazy time length, but just a ton of mass. And he was coming in there. There was a hot doe in there, and he was in and out of there like 3 times throughout the day. And I was just like, man, I got to make a move. And so I got down midday, drove to the other lease, got in there, and I probably got in the stand about 2:30 and shot him at 3:30.
No kidding.
And same deal. He come down the downwind side, and he was just going back up in there to check to see if there was any does traveling back through there. He was by himself. And so shot him. And then like I say, when I went back, it was the same property for my daughter. Didn't hunt in that stand because I'm in a a lock on stand, kind of on the. It's hard to explain, but there's just like a few individual trees. So I'm like on the outside perimeter of the main wood lot, but there's a few just individual trees by themselves. So, and she wasn't going to be able to hunt up there, especially with me. So in the movement and all that first deer, I was like, she needs to be in a ground blind as concealed as possible. So I basically took the same setup, set it up, 25 yards on the downwind side of where these scrapes and these runs are, down the edge. And that's what he did. But he came out at like 20 yards, or 18 yards, because he was right next to us. And so if we would have been any closer in for a closer shot, he would have seen us and been like, nah, I'm out.
Yeah.
And so, but it's kind of funny because all the grass had started dying out. So I took a pop-up blind down there on a Wednesday when I saw the wind was going to change out of the south. I went and put it out on a Wednesday. And I typically don't do this. I don't really like hunting out of pop-up blinds because deer get used to them, or kind of get freaked out by them. But it all depends how you brush them in. But so what I ended up doing is there was a bunch of tall, kind of like CRP grass, and I went to Tractor Supply, and they had erosion control matting. It's like a netting with straw in it.
Yeah.
And so I saw it, and it just a light bulb came on, and I was like, dude, I can wrap this blind and make it look like a hay bale. And there's hay bales all over the place, so the deer don't think nothing about it. So I go down there on a Wednesday, put it out, wrap the whole thing. Had some deer actually walk by it later that afternoon and literally looked right at it, paid no attention to anything. It never alarmed them, because sometimes I'll get videos. I run a lot of my cameras, most all my cameras at video, to just kind of see which way they're going, coming from, going to, their reactions to things. And all the deer that passed it didn't pay any attention to it, not like kind of like backstepping or avoiding or going around it or anything. So I was like, all right, we're in the money. And so we waited till Saturday when I knew that wind was going to shift out of the south, and it worked out. It doesn't always work out as planned, as but it worked out for us. So it was good. It was good.
That's awesome, man.
But to your point, I don't really hunt over the feeders. I'll take and hand scatter corn. Of course, I got a lot of pigs, so they come in like vacuum cleaners and you know wipe it out pretty quick. But most of the time, what I'll do is I'll go and put it out just enough, and I stay like most of the time on the perimeter of the trees. So most of the time I can drive in, just dump it out and go. So if deer are bedded in that wood lot, it's no different than a farmer or rancher just driving around in his pasture. The trucks and tractors don't really bother them. It's the legs walking through their home is what
Right.
really freaks them out. So, but yeah, so I try to bait with corn at least to just get them stopped or coming back to check and see if it's there, if I can, or if like my lease in Grayson County, I tagged out on a pretty nice 8-point there, and they weren't coming to feeders for anything there. There were so many acorns, so I kind of had to just switch around and basically hunt just travel corridors from bedding to where these acorn patches were.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends.
Yeah. And you said that you do run some food plot setups and everything like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Which it's I enjoy doing it. You know what I mean? And right now I've got one that's grown in pretty good, that I don't have a lot of pigs on, but the properties that I've got a lot of pigs or that's close to creeks, I don't even bother with them anymore. I mean, the pigs, as soon as they smell that freshly plowed dirt, dude, they annihilate those things.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, I've got one right now. It's pretty good. And I've got a buck. I've just recently posted him. He survived the season. He could be a really, really good deer next year. So I'm glad he made it. Anyway, he's coming to that food plot every day right now. And he was showing up there at the tail end of the season. He was showing up in daylight in that food plot. And so I drove down there one day while he was there, just intentionally to blow him out, just to kind of get him to going back to nocturnal. And then he stayed coming in at night the rest until the season ended. So I kind of, I robbed somebody else of an opportunity, but that's the way it goes.
That's funny. So what do you look for when you're trying to figure out where you're going to put a food plot?
Well, a couple things. If I've got a pond close by, because there's nothing worse than filling big water totes in your truck or trailer and having to haul them to where you're going. You got to get a pump, a generator, some way to irrigate it. So most of the time what I'll do is if it's somewhere I've got a creek or a pond that I naturally have water, I'll try to put it somewhere close to that. So that way I can just pump water out of the pond or the creek and irrigate it whenever I need to. Cause like this year, I had to replant one of them twice because we didn't get any of the rain that they thought we were going to get. And so the first one, the seed just burned up. And so anyway, so a lot of it just kind of I'll do it based off of convenience, if there's water nearby. Cause like I say, I've got some of the big, 500-gallon totes, but it's just a pain to have to go fill those up, haul them over where you're going and deal with that. But like I say, the bad part for me is I've pretty much every lease I have has pigs on it. And so, I don't want to spend a whole bunch of money on seed and travel and going and, watering these things and the pigs just destroying them. Cause like I say, I've only got one that actually turned out really good this year, but that's on one. I literally have seen one pig all year.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a big hurdle that I'm trying to figure out for our place for next year is because I mean, you've heard our stories and everything and know that we have played the feeder game pretty hard up till now, and I'm wanting to change it up for next year and put some food plots in, but the landowner runs cattle on the place too, and I'm racking my brain
Just as
on
bad as pigs.
yeah, I'm racking my brain
Yeah.
on how I'm gonna navigate that without just busting my butt putting up a ridiculous amount of fence. So
Well, and I'll be honest with you, because I've run into that too. I've gotten to the point where one of my Oklahoma leases, I went and ran, hot wire fence all the way around this food plot because there was cows on it. And then it got to where the deer were kind of like spooked of jumping the fence. Anything I had like any type of fence, they didn't like, because sometimes I've done hog panels around feeders, and those mature bucks do not like it. Even though I made it oversized where it wasn't like too tight for them, they just, I don't know, they didn't really care for it. I'd see them more than anything walk around the outskirts, just scent checking the does, but not really ever jumping in to eat.
Yeah.
And so I kind of did away with all that. It's yeah, that's a tough one, because cows can be some of the most destructive things ever. And so, like I say, the hot wire is what I ended up doing on one of them in Oklahoma, and had a decent food plot, and kept the cows out of it. But it just, you never know how the deer are going to react to some sort of fence, but and to be honest with you, I've seen the farmers around here plant winter wheat, and I've seen the deer eat winter wheat more than any other thing I've ever planted. I'm talking, I've planted everything under the sun. I mean, and it's the weirdest thing. I had some sugar beets one year. I mean, dude, the bulbs on these things was insane. And I mean, the sprouts on them was just nuts. Even the pigs weren't eating them. I was like, man, this is the weirdest. I mean, and it was freezing cold. I mean, it was a late season, and they weren't touching them. But you'll see them up north. Of course, different, they're having to eat them or starve to death. So maybe that's why they do. I don't know, but it's weird. But anyway, the winter wheat, and is what I've seen the deer eat the most here.
Yeah. Now, do you do anything to try and help out your soil in any regard, or are you just trying to find
Not
stuff
really,
that grows natively?
not really. Yeah, not really. I know there's a lot of people that get into testing them and checking the pH and all that. I mean, if it was my personal property to where I could manage everything that's going on, I don't have cows, I can eliminate the pigs, trap them, do whatever, then I could have done, I could probably, see myself spending more time into managing a lot of that. But I've got so many uncontrollable variables right now that I'm like, I don't really need to go test a sample. It's one of those deals. Hey, if it grows, great. If it doesn't, then now I know, but the thing is with winter wheat, dude, it'll pretty much grow just about in anything unless it's just flooded, Yeah. And so, so yeah, no, I don't spend a lot of time on that. Cause I just, I've got 2 food plots right now that one did really good. The other one's halfway decent. And I've got deer that come pretty much every night, and they'll sit and kind of graze on it, but they're not eating that any more than they did the corn.
Yeah. Interesting.
And so, yeah.
So you think with this year it was just the warmer weather and the later acorn crop that kind of, at least you referenced that earlier, and as far as that was, you kind of had to switch over to some transition areas and hunting that style.
Yeah, just because, the bait piles, they didn't there was so much food, when we don't have any freezes, so it doesn't freeze and rot out the acorns.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much green vegetation that these deer eat all year round. When all that's still going on into December, because we hadn't had a freeze yet all the way through the rut, and there's still acorns all over the ground. Like, I mean, I walk around, it sounds like bubble pack because there's so many of them on the ground. You're just like, it's pointless for me to go throw a bunch of corn on the ground, because for one, I'm battling the pigs that are going to eat it more than anything. So yeah, when there's crops like that, then I just figure out where they're bedding, where they're transitioning to. Most of the time I'm trying to just find the doe bedding and then trying to hunt there, because I know the bucks are eventually going to come to that looking.
Yeah.
Because that's something that doesn't really change a whole lot. A buck's bed could change and vary. Doe bedding areas don't really change that much. Most of them are always bedded relatively close to food.
Yeah. No, that makes sense for sure. So you were right before you got into the story about your daughter's deer. You were talking about Kansas and the postponement there and everything. Did you end up making it up to Kansas or no?
No, no. Like I say, I talked to my buddy. I guess it was the first week of December. It was right before the gun season was going to start up there, and he's like, dude, he goes, I couldn't put you on a 140-inch deer right now, and he's like, I don't know what the deal is. He's like, it's a weird year. We haven't really seen any big deer, and the ones we have seen have only been at night, either traveling from a long ways away or whatever. And so it was kind of one of those things to where I hate getting drawn for somewhere and then not at least going.
Right.
But a buddy of mine, that I put in with, I used to have a lease down there with. He went and hunted some public land, and he ended up shooting a pretty nice buck, but he said it was a lot of hours. He took multiple trips down there. He's like, dude, it's a weird year. And I've kind of gotten that feedback from just a lot of people, especially here locally. They're like, man, it was just a tough year. And I probably know more people that didn't tag out than I do that did tag out.
No, I believe that for sure.
Strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my dad didn't, my brother didn't. I'm on a lease in Grayson County with 3 other guys. None of them did. I mean, it's weird, man.
Yeah.
It's weird.
My dad might be the only one that I know of that's come close at least. He's filled his mature buck tag actually pretty early in general season, and he's got all but one of his doe tags filled. He's actually out there right now trying to get a couple more hunts in before this Texas winter weather system hits us and everything.
Dude, I tell you, it's got them moving right now. Holy crap, my cameras have been going crazy today. But so what happened? I know at the beginning of the season you were contemplating like an 8-point or a 10-point or something, or which one? I remember you saying something about this. What happened with that?
Man, so we had 4, like going into, I would call it kind of mid bow season ish. I think was around the time that I put that video up or something, and we had 4 bucks that I was really trying to contemplate shooting, and 3 of them had daylighted. The number 1 deer, our biggest deer, the oldest deer on the property, I was not getting any daylight pictures of him at all, and he was like clockwork. I knew where he bedded, and I knew the direction that he would travel and everything every night, and he would stop in front of this camera at this one feeder every evening when he was leaving his bed, and every morning like at 4 a.m. Coming back to bed. He would just stop, get a quick bite, and then keep on cruising. I had pictures of it was like clockwork every single night. Like between 7:30 and 8 p.m. and between 4 and 4:30 a.m. that deer was there.
So you think he was just coming from so far away that it was dark coming in and dark going back?
So, man, I'm not. Yes, and I guess so. Like I said, I knew the woods where he was bedded, and we have a small corner of it on our property, and then the neighbors have kind of the rest of the portion of it and everything. And I knew that had to be where he was at least bedding and where he was going, or staying. Where he was going in the to cruise around all night long. I was kind of up in there. I was like, I kind of have an idea that he's going north on the property, but I don't really know. Like, I don't know where this deer is going. Yeah. And then it was mid-November, I think. I'd have to go back and look at the trail cam, but my dad's stand, which is almost a mile away, I have an 8 a.m. picture of him all of a sudden. I'm like, it popped up on my Reveal app, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's him, just out of the blue. Mm-hmm. And that was right before the rut really got cranked up. I'm like, okay, he's looking for doe bedding, like he's trying to figure it out and everything. So that gave me an idea on kind of where he was going to be roaming and everything. And it was about the same time that Nick started getting some pictures at one of their stands, which was a little bit farther south of my dad's, of the same deer. And it's like, okay, he's moved. And at the same time, I stopped getting pictures of him down the south side where he'd been bedding. So I was like, okay, the rut's starting, and this is where he's moving up here. And I knew there was doe bedding up there on one of these hillsides, kind of this little funnel. It's like, okay, this is where it's going to happen. Um, I'm saving part of this story just because it's not my story to tell, it's Nick's story to tell. Because Nick is the only guy on the place to actually lay eyes on this deer. But in the end, that deer, he made it through the entire season. I have pictures of him Sunday at one of my stands. So he's still alive. Pretty
So the
much
saga continues.
it will continue. The story is not over for sure. But we were looking at several good bucks, and it was just another one of those things where I feel like I'm too ingrained into the Texas hunting culture of feeders and all that kind of stuff, and I tried to, especially when I'm like, I gotta kill one of these deer. I was trying to break out of it, and I did a couple of hunts in some spots that I wouldn't traditionally be sitting in, and everything, just with our normal mindset and everything. And I just need to implement that a little bit more on breaking that mold, because I only had 2 hunts this year where I actually put eyes on one of our target bucks. And they were both in this stand that's really close to camp. Ironically, walking distance from camp. One of my favorite spots to hunt, honestly. But the bucks, they weren't coming to food. They were just, every time they were cruising through. The first encounter I had, he skirted the whole clearing and everything. Like, he never came under 70 yards from me the whole time. And it was early in the afternoon. It was like 4 o'clock that he was coming around. And then the other one was another really nice 8-point. It was actually the one that, I don't know if you saw the picture of the deer that Nick's dad ended up shooting at Thanksgiving. But really, really nice 8-point. A few days prior to that, I was in that stand, and that buck came running through there, chasing a doe, just full speed running around. And I have the whole thing on video. We're gonna post it, but I'm like at full draw, like trying to get this deer to stop, and
Waiting to stop.
following him around and everything, and
Yeah,
just
the joys of bow hunting.
yeah, he won't stop, and he got like right behind this one tree, and I have the tree canopy of the tree I'm in blocking me, and he stopped there for a split second, then kept going. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. But those were the 2 closest moments that I came to shooting a buck. So, and then there was one deer. He's one of the deer in that video that I posted. I think he was like number 4 or so on our hit list, was the buck that my dad ended up shooting. Nice 8-point with some decent mass and a split brow. He's a cool deer. My dad shot him in early general season. So, yeah, the two dads on the property.
Well,
they got it done.
well, hey man, that's what it's about, though. Still get to cherish those moments. It's that's good. But hey, at least the deer live. So I don't know if you guys really shed hunt or not, but man, this spring, dive in there where you think that he's at, and see if you can find the sheds. That'd be pretty cool to build the story, going into next year. If you could find the shed, especially both sides, that'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I know Nick and I have plans this year to definitely put a little bit more after the season closes, a little bit more time in out there, a little more boots on the ground, trying to figure out kind of some alternative options and everything for next year that we didn't really have this year. That way we're not boxing ourselves in with these feeders and everything. And like I said, I'd love to put a couple food plots out there, and I just gotta figure out what I'm gonna do about cattle.
So did you say, do y'all have pigs there or no?
We do. They're not like running rampant through the place. They've kind of declined over the past few years, but we do have pigs.
So do y'all ever just do like scattered corn anywhere by itself, away from anything?
We haven't really done it a whole lot, no.
Yeah. See, because that's how I ended up finding those deer. It was a new property that I got on. Well, I got on it last January, and I just happened to go down there and put a camera out, not knowing anything. I just went in there. I could see like some kind of trails going through, and I could see some were pigs, but I just took hand scattered some corn on the ground, put a camera on it, was like, we'll see what comes through. And like 2 nights later, this huge 10 point with a drop tine on it shows up, and I was like, dang, this might actually turn into a good property. And so then I just kept baiting that one spot. But the deer would find it and they'd keep coming back to check it. But the pigs came in there, and once they found it, they got to where they'd come every day looking to see if it was there. And but I will say, just in terms of trying to get inventory, you don't have a lot of pigs and you have a way to keep a section that can keep cows out, or if you have a corner that you can fence off and just hand scatter corn in the corner so it keeps the pigs out, but the deer can be comfortable jumping in, and put a camera on it. That way you can at least see, because most of the time your smart, mature bucks are going to go to that bait pile, but they won't go to a feeder or where they've smell you've been walking to a stand or something like that. And that way, because you might put a camera and be like, dude, I didn't even know we had this deer on this property.
Yeah.
Dude, it's when people say it's like these deer almost like they crawl in a hole, because like I say, I was hunting a spot is basically 100 acres, but one strip of trees, all plowed fields, housing addition on one other side. And I knew the buck that I shot was somewhere around there. I was like, where can he possibly go? And I only had a handful of pictures of him. The other deer I was seeing all the time. And I'm just like, where could he possibly disappear to? I mean, and I think he was just so old and reclusive that, he wasn't getting up wasting time. He had his spot picked out, and I'm guessing he was in that heavy cedar thicket down the creek where the elevation he could see, it was thick enough that, nothing could really kind of get in on him without him, hearing it, seeing or smelling it. And he just didn't move until he had to. And because like even when the pre-rut started, and I started seeing all these younger bucks kind of getting out early, no sign of him. Because at first I thought, man, maybe he got shot. So really until the rut started and the majority of those came into estrus, that's when he showed up.
Yeah.
And I was just like, obviously wasn't his first rodeo. He knew when it was time to go and conserve as much energy and not have to sit and fight for the competition. Because I watched bucks fight like crazy because there was only a few does in this area, but a ton of bucks and some mature bucks. So it was pretty intense to watch it when you see the competitions like that, because there's only 4 does to all these bucks. But yeah, hand scattering corn's the way to go if you don't have a lot of pigs, just because it'll tell you a lot that a feeder will never reveal.
Yeah. No, that's definitely good information for sure. And that's the interesting thing too, is like I can almost draw a line until the rut. At least the rut, it like these lines cross, but I can almost draw a line because the property that we have is so big and spread out. Like there are bucks that just that's their area, and then you have another buck that just that's their area, and until the rut happens, those lines don't cross. Like those bucks steer clear of each other. You're hunting different deer on the north end of the property than you are on the south end of the property, and so it's just it's interesting that dynamic and everything. And like beginning of the season, we had one of the first reveal cell cams that I put out when we got this spot up and running, I have a picture of like 4 bucks there in velvet, and one of them's this big old like 10 point, like a beautiful buck, and the only 10 point we saw this year. Everything else was an 8. But then it's like a week or two later, this buck that ended up being like the number 1 buck I just talked about, the nocturnal deer. This is August. He showed up in daylight, still in velvet, and as soon as he showed up, that 10 point was gone. That 10 point wasn't anywhere to be found. And throughout the year, that 10 point, there was one stand, one spot I have like on the edge of the property, towards the edge, and that 10 point would show up like once every 2 or 3 weeks, like just for a morning, like almost like he was coming back
Mhm.
in just to check and see,
Yes, it's still
hit
here.
hit
Yeah.
a couple scrapes, maybe see if he's still there, whatever it might be, and then bounce. And then what was really interesting is, and I'll try not to give too much away, but Nick, like I said, he had a couple encounters with this buck. He did throw a shot out there at one point, and there, like, a lot of it was up in the air because after he shot, this deer disappeared for a little bit, and all of a sudden
Mhm.
all the other bucks start doing different things, which made me think. I was like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, is this deer dead? Because
Yeah.
all these other bucks, all of a sudden that 10 point comes back in, and like for several days is in there. This other 8 point that had a split G2, he starts showing up in a way that he hadn't done before. This other buck pushes farther south. I'm like, what is going on? These deer are completely changing
Yeah.
everything. And then the second that buck shows back up, boom, everything's back. It's like he hit
Yeah.
the
It's
reset button.
it's
He's like, no,
it's
my place.
yeah, it's weird. I mean, in the whitetail world, I mean, there's a pecking order, there's a hierarchy,
Yeah,
and those deer, they once they separate out of those bachelor groups and they kind of find their fall range or where they're going, and it becomes territorial at that point. And so you'll see some of them like sparring, uh, not really so much out of territory. It's just, um, you know, it's like they communicated. They know, they can smell their scent to where it's like, hey, this is his spot, whatever. And then you'll see does going in to one of those buck spots, and then those bucks will start fighting because now he's like, hey, you're in my spot trying to take my girls. And it's if you sit back and watch it, it's really kind of fascinating of how bucks behavior is like that.
yeah,
Almost like, you think of it of just like, hey, it's a big playground, all the deer will come. But the same thing, man, you find a bully buck, and depending on the other deer, the other bucks' personalities, some of them, they're just fighters. Dude, I've got some this year. There's nothing left. Just, I mean, I'm talking sheared off to just bases. Like and they were beautiful deer, but they're just fighters, dude, scars all over them. And you're just like, these deer just want to fight something. And so, but then you'll have some really big deer where you're going, this should be the bully of the group, the alpha male, and they're some of the most shy. And I think that's the way my buck was. He was so old. He had some scars on him probably from fighting when he was younger, but I think he was so old now, he's like, I'm out.
yeah,
And so he just stayed to himself. But like the buck that I shot back in 2018, obviously seeing him, you'd be like, dude, no deer is going to mess with it. No deer is going to fight that deer.
yeah.
He did not have a single point broke off, not one.
Wow.
And so you're kind of going, either they were so intimidated by him that nothing tried to fight him, or his personality was so shy that he didn't engage in fighting.
Yeah.
And so, who really knows? Now he did have a scar in the side of his ear, and like a zigzag scar that you can tell brow tine had ripped his nose. But like I said, it could have been way early on when he was younger.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just kind of weird. The bucks you would think would be the alpha males sometimes are the most timid ones, that you hit a set of rattling horns and they are bolting, dude. And then others, you hit them and they're coming on a beeline looking for a fight. It's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I enjoy, like, I got an opportunity, at least with a lot of younger bucks this year, I had a lot of young bucks in front of me throughout the season and had a chance just to watch them, and even amongst themselves, just a couple 2-year-olds, whatever it might be, establishing their own pecking order was interesting. One of my most interesting hunts, I think, was, I already talked about the beginning of it, when that one buck came in and skirted around, didn't come under 70 yards, early in the hunt. But that same day, we were getting down to like the last 15 minutes light, and I was thinking the whole time, like, okay, like the rut's coming in, this buck is in here. All I need is a hot doe to come into this clearing, and that buck, he could be coming back. Like, my hopes were still up that I could see him again. And I didn't see any other deer until like the last 15 minutes of legal light. And all of a sudden, it was just like everything happened all at once. I saw deer coming up the trail, like to my left and kind of behind me. I could see does walking up. I could see does coming in through the mesquites out here up to my right. And then I could see this other 8 point walking in from, to the north of me to my left. And he was decent, but I had him on camera. I knew he was a younger deer and I wasn't going to shoot him. But I all of a sudden, just like that, have deer coming in from three different directions. But I keep hearing grunts back here on this trail, and I'm like, man, that I feel like that's got to be him. And I keep looking back there, and I'm trying to look through the tree canopy, but I can't. I can't make anything out. I just hear the periodic grunt with these does and everything. And we're getting down to last light, and that smaller 8 point starts coming in, and then you just hear just crashing, like it sounded like a tree was falling, and that target buck, that big 8 that had been in there earlier, and he was a big bodied deer, and it was him back there. I hadn't laid eyes on him yet the second time he's coming in, but he saw that younger buck coming in, and all you see is just body
Mm-hmm.
mass flying through the trees, man.
Oh
And he
yeah.
takes off after that younger deer, and they just hightail it off to the north, off into the mesquite thicket. I
Yeah.
was like, oh my gosh, that deer's getting too
Yeah. That's
close to his
awesome to see.
girls. It
Yeah.
was cool.
It's cool to see for sure. But yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, especially like, where we hunt, um, if you got a feeder, because I hear a lot of people saying, man, I got piles of corn under the feeder, like no deer coming to the feeder. um you'll always know when does are about to come into estrus, when that rut's about to happen, is because a lot of times the does will stop coming to the feeders because they know that they're about to go into heat and the bucks will be coming there harassing them. So that's always a telltale sign for me, because I do run like gravity feeders and stuff, so they can come and go as they please. When the does stop coming to those, I know it's about to be on fire somewhere in the woods. It's just a matter of being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, we could definitely tell when our rut kicked off because we went like that. For example, that stand up close to camp. It's not uncommon, for me to get a picture one evening with 9 or 10 does and yearling bucks and stuff in there. But
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, you start getting to that, second week in November, getting into that window, and you might have one little doe walking through, and
Yeah,
obviously something changed. So
yeah, by herself, and yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's the week of Thanksgiving is always good for us. It was a little warm, but that, man, it's somewhere from that November 19th through November 30th. Man, that period of time, for at least here, is, man, it's, you got to be in the woods. And it's hard for a lot of people because they want to go, you know that first weekend in November, because so much of that's building into the pre-rut. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of big deer killed at that time too, but I think there's a lot of guys that burn out those best stands before they get to that prime
Yeah.
window. You know what I mean? And so now, if you're going in there and hunting it and hunting and hunting it, and you're educating the does, and the does stop coming, well, now you got a bigger problem, because if the does ain't coming, then the bucks ain't coming there either.
Yeah.
And so, so it's a chess match, man. You just kind of have to adapt to what the seasons bring you.
Yeah. No, I agree. We got a lot of insight in recent episodes with, Dr. Grant Woods and Don Higgins and those guys and everything, and they talked about how, at least for them in their respective areas, the rut is one of their least favorite times to hunt just because of the lack of predictability, right? It's just, the deer are
Mm-hmm.
just all over the place, but, you know, leading into that and even after that, you have deer that are more consistent with their patterns and everything, and that being their favorite time to hunt. And I agree. I know you've talked about that on a previous podcast, just how you don't just because the opening weekend doesn't mean that you're in a stand. So
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, 100%. It's you know, the week of Halloween, that pre-rut is, man, it's one of my favorite times. That's really the kickoff when I know there's some big deer around. when I actually start seeing them daylight, or or getting on their feet more than they previously had been. That's always a really good window, is that last week of October, into the first few days of November. But yeah, and that's if you're hunting a specific buck that you're in his area. Because I agree, once you hit the peak of the rut, or they've bred and now they're on to, depending how many does you have. Now, if you have all the does on your property, then you're in the game for a while, because they're going to stay there breeding. But if you only have, a handful of does, and once those does get bred, those bucks are going to start searching farther away for the next available does, and who knows, that could be the next property over, a few 500 yards, or it could be miles down the road. And, then you get into late season, for us, it's hard to say, because you get into late season, you typically think, oh, late season, they're run down from the rut, they're needing to come to food, it's freezing, they got to replenish to go into the winter. But dude, I mean, here in Texas, our winters aren't winters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's and so the deer's survival instincts aren't as, I guess, as extreme as what deer are up north. Because if they don't recoup from it, they die. A lot of them die anyway, just because of the extreme cold. But our deer don't really have to weather that storm. I mean, we get a few days of really cold, but it's nothing like, blanketed with snow where there's nothing for them to eat. I mean, these deer still have pecans, they've still got acorns, there's browse. I mean,
yeah.
So the late season isn't, I don't like coming down to the wire relying on late season, just because if we had brutally cold with snow coming, then yeah, you could be in the game, because if you got a food source, you're going to find the deer. But we don't really have that luxury here. It's honestly, if our deer season slid back 1 month, would probably be better for us, because man, we could get into February when we start getting our coldest temperatures. Because I've seen a lot of deer on camera in February, just winter coat on, big bullies just walking up to some of the feeders, just like, dude, I don't care if I get shot, I'm hungry.
Yeah.
And so, but we can't hunt at that time. And so that's I think that's another reason too, is a lot of that pressure is, you don't have that pressure. So you're starting to see a lot of those bucks come to feeders quite a bit now. So, but I don't know, man. It's I guess that's why we love it, so it's unpredictable around the board, depending, where you hunt. And we'll see. But
yeah, no,
but yeah,
I was just gonna say, I get that entirely. Like, there's been times, especially this season, where I'm out there, I'm in my stand, I'm like, excuse me, I'm like, why do I like this? why do I enjoy this? And then one thing will happen, I'll be like, oh man, this is why I love this. This is awesome. It's just, it's a love-hate relationship for sure.
It is. And that's the thing. 'Cause, somebody was asking me, like, how come you don't really hunt that much in the early season? I said, because I hate mosquitoes with a passion. And if you can find a way to keep mosquitoes from biting me without me putting off on, which kind of defeats the purpose of me going in the woods when I smell like off, then let me know. But dude, there's something in my blood that I can literally go outside and nobody around me will get bit by mosquitoes, and they will annihilate me. And so a lot of times I don't hunt when it's hot just because of that reason. Because I mean, I can't be sitting in a tree like this, like every 5 seconds. And so it's but if a deer's big enough, then I'll suffer through it. It's it just kind of depends. But most of the time, that Thanksgiving time frame, it's finally cool enough that I'm not dealing with the mosquitoes. A lot of deer on their feet. their guards kind of down for the most part, thinking about the ladies more than the people they've seen, slinging an arrow at them. So it depends, because I mean, it really just depends on what your neighbors do too, how much pressure they get. Because like Grayson County, at my other lease, we had some really nice deer early season and then just vanished. And you're kind of going, dude, what the heck is going on with that? And I'm talking running protein feeders, spin cast feeders, acorns like you wouldn't believe, got ponds, creeks, cover. You're going, a whitetail paradise is what it should be. And all the mature bucks just vanished. And you're kind of going, well, there ain't that many hunters next to us where they've shot all these deer. It's like, where do they go?
Yeah.
And a few of them have come back, and the one that was really kind of my target, he never come back. So I don't know,
the crazy game of whitetail that we play.
Yeah, it is, and so it's I found some sheds from a buck last year that was an absolute giant, and I was hoping I would have seen him this year, and he no-showed. But and I hadn't heard of anybody killing him, and you would have heard about it for a deer that big. But and it's not to say that he didn't die of natural cause. Something happened to him, and
Yeah.
Hard to say.
So you mentioned at the beginning, you talked about, your county, Collin County, and that area being not as high for deer numbers. Is that just because of the growth and development in general in the area, or why is that?
It's just you're starting to see more and more. Like every year, there's getting to be more and more deer hit on the road, so the numbers are starting to grow. But like, I don't shoot does at all. The most does I've ever seen at one time this year was 9. But normally if I see does, they're 2 or 3, maybe a couple groups of 2 or 3. It's not like I have a feeder and 30 does show up.
Right.
Like Kansas was insane. Like I would go out there on a bean field. There's like 100 deer in this field. A lot of times, hunting here, I'm lucky. I can hunt all weekend and be lucky to even see a deer sometimes. So I would say it, and I can't really say that just in general of Collin County itself, because I understand that's also isolated pockets, for the properties that I hunt. Because some of them, butt up to the core land of Lake Lavon, which is obviously a sanctuary for these deer because there's no hunting there. So there are larger numbers of deer that come off of there, but what comes off of that property onto mine is a much smaller number, because a lot of the deer are going, hey, if I've got food, cover, and water in my safe space, why do I want to go out there where I see people, dogs are chasing me, I smell scent on the ground, there's a creepy feeder that goes off, scares the crap out of me, so even though the deer are there, number wise, I don't see them, but there's just not, it's not like I drive down the road and just see deer all over the place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you go down to like San Antonio or like Marble Falls, and there's deer like laying in people's yards, and they don't allow hunting. And you're kind of going, well, dude, you are so overpopulated with deer. I'm surprised the insurance companies aren't like, dude, I'm not paying for y'all's vehicles anymore if y'all don't put some sort of conservation efforts here to manage these deer herds. This is crazy. And so, and now that they've opened a season, I don't think we'll ever get to that point. Because I don't know what the harvest numbers around here this year wasn't good, but but there's a lot more hunters here than what there used to be. So, the deer numbers are growing, but there's also more and more hunters harvesting deer. But to your point, the areas that did have woods before now getting developed, it's not that the deer are dying, it's just pushing them into different pockets, And so, like I say, really the only safe places for them that aren't getting developed is all the Corps of Engineers land, you know, like Lake Louisville, Lake Lavon, Lake Grapevine, all those areas that have Corps land that can't be built on. That's where all the deer are,
Yeah.
you know. And you're just fortunate if you hunt next to them where there's a creek or a tributary that comes up out of those locations through your property, because eventually once the deer or the bucks have bred the deer in those areas, then they'll travel up those creeks and you know, look for other does. But
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's you know, they were trying to pass that gun season here, and I'm glad that didn't pass, because our numbers, the deer population wasn't high enough in general. If we would have opened it with a gun season, dude, they'd have been wiped out in 3 years.
No, that makes
And
total
so,
sense to me. Nothing against anybody that rifle hunts or hunts with a firearm, but I get where you're coming from with that. I understand.
well, and the development. I
Yeah.
mean, dude, I don't want somebody shooting a high-powered rifle right next to my house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, you know, so I mean, I'm glad it didn't. And I understand they're looking at it going, well, Collin County's big. Okay, well, now you're only at the luxury of going, well, the gun only does me a lot of good if I have a big property that I can hunt on. But some of my properties are like the back of neighborhoods, basically. I'm almost like one of the Seek One guys where I'm hunting in the backyard where I see guys, you know, walking around over there. And so, and unfortunately, that's what it's getting to, is everything's getting, you know, everything's getting developed. Like 2 of my properties right now is for sale. And so, you know, it's, and that's why I always keep my ear to the pulse of lease properties coming up, just because I'm always trying to find somewhere, because I know the ones I do have is just a matter of time before, you know, they sell, or an owner says, man, I don't want to allow hunting anymore. And so,
Yeah.
you know, so it's the grind always continues, you know. But
Hey, the proof's in the pudding. You're killing giants, and the Seek One guys are killing giants. So I guess there's something to it, you know.
well, you know, it's kind of funny, you know. Somebody was talking about that the other day. They're just like, man, you know, how do you think the Seek One guys are you know, constantly killing big deer? And I was like, you go to areas that have big deer.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, but I've door knocked, I don't know how many times, and I always get a no. And I was like, well, think of how many times they've door knocked and gotten no's.
Yeah.
And, you know, because somebody had asked me, they're like, well, you know, how do you come across getting these leases? And, you know, and part of that, you know, it's like, I kind of wanted to keep it a little tight to my vest of like how I go about it. But for me, I don't have the time like the Seek One guys do, where I can get in my truck, drive to 2 other states, and knock on someone's door. Now, ideally, talking to someone and making it personal is definitely a lot better. But, you know, a lot of times I would just get like on a Hunt Stand app, find the property owner's information, get their phone number, and call them. But a lot of times what I would try to do is look them up, see if they're on Facebook, having mutual friends, somewhere that I could make a connection with them. Because if I just called you and you own property and I'm like, man, his property looks good. And if I just called you, didn't know me from Adam, hey, would you be interested in leasing property? No, I don't allow hunting. Or, yeah, I hunt it myself.
Yeah.
But, and then I'm trying to persuade you at that point. And you're like, no, I said no, whatever, bye. But if I called you and I was like, hey, man, I happened to see on or look you up on Facebook. I know you're mutual friends with one of my best friend's friends. How do you know him? And then it starts that dialogue, you know, then it's a whole lot easier to get a yes from someone if there's some sort of, you know, some sort of,
something in
thing
common
there
like that. Yeah.
you can relate to. Yeah. And so, so a lot of times that's what I do. All the legwork comes from researching them, you know, who they know that I know. So I make that connection early on, because then a lot of times they're kind of like, oh, you know him. And then sometimes they might call them and be like, hey, this guy called me. That actually happened to me a while back because my sister-in-law was like, hey, do you know this person? Because they said you reached out to them asking for some property. And she's like, that's one of my friends through somebody else. And anyway, it was just, and then they found out because first they were like, oh no, we don't really want to hunt, but then found out that it was my sister-in-law, and so it's just, to me, that's how it works for me. Is so basically all the properties that I've gotten leases through somebody I know or somebody that knows somebody that I know, and I've had a lot that just like, yeah, we don't allow hunting or whatever, but it's the old saying, you can't hit it if you don't swing.
Yeah.
And I think that's the scary part for people is they're like, I don't want to door knock and I don't know what to say. Like, I don't want to door knock. Hey, will you lease property? No, I don't allow hunting. Okay, thanks, bye. And now you're kind of like, how many times am I going to do this before I'm just wasting hours and tons of gas driving all over? And that's what I'm saying. That's why I let social media do that homework for me.
Yeah.
I'll look them up, find out, not to like sound creepy, but find out where they work. Somewhere I can figure out an end of like, hey, I see you work there. My brother used to work there or whatever. It changes the tone for people. Or it's even led to, well, man, I don't really, I hunt the property myself, but you're welcome to hunt with me if you want to. Oh, well, what would you charge? Nothing, come out and help me out or whatever. It's just, and then it becomes a relationship type thing. And, and so that's kind of the way that I go about it. Cause I've watched the Seek one and he's kind of disclosed that. And I'm going, dude, first of all, I don't have the time to get in my truck and go door knock all over the place.
Yeah.
And, I just try to be more efficient at doing it.
Yeah.
And so say you reach out to 50 people, all you need is one or two.
Yeah.
To say yes,
No, yeah, you're right. It only takes one. You mentioned Seek One and talked about them. I forget I know they name a lot of their deer, a lot of their hunts, and I forget which one it was. I think it was a film they put out last year or so that just that crazy 200 plus inch deer he had like double kickers or flyers coming out the side and everything, and it was a deer that he killed in that like super sketchy part of
the
town.
meth lab, or
like people
doing drugs.
Yeah, people are doing drugs, and this, like, he's watching him from his stand do drugs, and he's trying to kill this deer. And I remember him doing like he went all in. Somebody just sent him a picture of it, and there was a barn with graffiti on it, and he spent hours just scouring Google Earth trying to find that barn so he knew where this deer was.
Dude,
it's insane what those guys
funny.
do.
It's funny, and the funny part is that's so relatable because I had somebody send me a picture of a really big deer, and they kind of told me a general area where it was, but the picture had a metal barn that had two shades of like a wainscot siding on it. And I did the same thing. I went through Google Maps, Street View, like house to house until I ended up finding where it was. And I didn't pursue it just because, the guy was, had permission to go over there and hunt it. But it was still one of those deals of going, if I lose one of my properties, though, at least I know that kind of buck is in that area. So I might start looking at other properties around there to hunt. But I saw what you're talking about. It's kind of funny because and that's what I'm saying. I use the technology and social media to do the legwork for me. Because essentially I kind of go the same route. I just don't physically, I have knocked on a few, but most of the time, unless you've got some sort of inside, most of the time people are like, I don't want the liability. I don't, I got cows, and then you're trying to justify all of it. But if you've got a connection where they know somebody or somebody that can vouch for you, they'd be like, oh, so-and-so, 9 times out of 10, they'll be like, well, I'll get back to you, let you know, or call me next week. And then most of the time they've called them. They're like, oh yeah, no, they're fine. They'll, whatever. And so, I mean, when people ask me, I always just kind of I just kind of say, man, I just, know people that just let me hunt or whatever. But that's really how I go about finding it, is looking them up through social media.
Yeah. Well, the secret to the recipe is now in Fall Obsession podcast. So, or part of it at
Well, I
least.
mean the thing is that's only part of it. I mean, you
Yeah.
still have to be able to have a mutual connection somewhere. 9 times out of 10,
Yeah.
or you'll get old landowners that aren't on social media, like old farmers that aren't on social media. Those are always the tough ones. But if those old farmers, if they're local, grew up there, they've known everybody that knows everybody.
Yeah.
So then it turns into going, hey, Grandpa, do you happen to know this farmer that has this ranch over here? Oh, yeah, that's so and so's brother, and hey, you know what I'm saying? And so you just leverage it with relationships, really.
Yeah.
Because I always think of it, if I was somebody, they knocked on my door and asked me, if you don't have a connection with me, or somebody knows somebody that can vouch for you, nah, I'm good. Because I mean, I don't know you nothing.
Yeah.
And so I kind of look at it from that aspect of going, I have to have some sort of connection to even get my foot in the door.
Yeah.
Because you might get lucky, knock on the door, and they'll be like, oh yeah, that'd be great, come on. But the problem is with some of those, they're going, yeah, sure, no problem. $6,000 for my 10 acres out back that doesn't have any deer on it.
Yeah.
Because that's the other part. That's the other part, is you've got to know, you can just knock on doors till you're blue in the face, but you gotta find properties that is going to have the caliber deer on it that you're after. And that's the trick. That's the hard part, is because, I mean, I can get permission to hunt properties all over and be like, okay, yeah, there's 2 doe on this place. And I can hope that a deer shows up from 6 miles away over at the lake. But
it's knowing that the juice is worth the squeeze.
Yeah, it's like I kind of like the challenge of it,
Yeah.
And so obviously, me growing up here, in McKinney, I just know a lot of contacts, mutual people. So I've been able to get several properties here. So the one for me now is Grayson County. Obviously, I've got a lease there, but just trying to find other properties to hunt, and it's the same thing. Just looking at some, and then some of them I'll be like, oh dang, my buddy lives here, and I didn't even know he lived there, and then I'll reach out to him. So, long story short, I had a buddy, I knew he lived in Grayson County, and I had actually been driving around on a hunting trip, scouting, looking around some of this public land, and I saw this guy's house, and I was like, dude, this guy's got like freaking primo spot, had a blind in the back of, so I was like, oh, this guy hunts, he ain't gonna let me hunt here. Well, I just happened to look on my hunt stand app, and it was a buddy of mine, and so I messaged him, and I was like, dude, I had no idea you lived here. You can back up to Hagerman. He's like, oh yeah. And he's like, hey, anytime you want to come on, I'll go show you the tree that I hunt in, and I'll show you some pictures of some deer. I was like, what the heck? And so so it's kind of funny, but it's the power of social media, and so it literally just driving around, and I just happened to look. So a lot of times what I'll do now is I'll look for properties that I think look good, or I'm interested in, and I'll just get the property owners' names, and I'll just go through them and see if it's anybody that I recognize and that I come across. And so the one I found last year, the one that I shot my buck on this year, I just happened to be scouring the landscape of property owners on these tributaries running up through these creeks. And I saw one, it was a last name that I recognized. And I was like, it's not a very common last name. It's like, I wonder if they're related to this person. So I reached out to the person I knew, and they're like, oh yeah, that's my grandfather's so-and-so. He's passed away. Does anybody hunt that? No, nobody's ever hunted it. Do y'all have farmers on it? Yeah, somebody does the ag. Well, do they let anybody hunt? No. And would y'all be interested in leasing it out? Sure, you can just go hunt if you want to. How much you charge? Nothing. Just go hunt. And so I go down there, and that's what I said. Had a drop time. Second day of putting the camera out there, but then found some guy's big hog pen feeders, or a hog pen like panel, like trap out there.
Yeah.
Which kind of told me he was doing it for the farmer because he was tearing up his fields. But then when dove season came along, like I say, I had 6 shooters all on this one property. I stayed out of there. All my cell cameras were on solar panels, so I didn't have to go in there for nothing. So I'm kind of just waiting it out. Opening morning of dove season, 2 Rangers roll up on trailers, unload. There's like 6 people in each one of them, driving all around. So I text the guy that's the contact for the landowner, and I said, I didn't think anybody had permission to hunt this. And he's like, they don't. So I sent him the picture, and about 5 minutes later, I see them all drive, get right back on the trailers and leave. So I think they were just hunting out there because nobody had ever hunted it.
Yeah.
And they didn't know who the landowner was. But, so it's just, so I kind of do that in my pastime is I try to find new properties and, how I can figure out who has it or whatever. The developers are always the hard part,
Yeah.
because a lot of times developments will have it under weird LLCs. And so it's a lot more legwork to figure out who the agent is or get a hold of them. And then a lot of times they're like, no, but sometimes those are the best ones because they own the land, but the development isn't planned for like 6 years. So you're kind of going, dude, I could hunt this while you are doing nothing with it. But it just kind of depends,
Yeah. No, another game that falls right in with all of it, I guess.
That's the game that starts at the end of deer season every year and goes all the way up basically about until August, of when I'm out of time to find one and start trying to prep for it. Yeah. But yeah, so it can be something as simple as I'm driving down the road. I've got a couple of them right now. I'm just waiting to catch this guy outside so I can stop and ask him, because I know it'll be a good spot, but I don't know if the guy literally ever leaves the inside of his house because I've never seen him outside in 2 years. And so, but if I can land that one, I can guarantee there'll be some giants off of that property, and nobody hunts it. He doesn't hunt it. So, and the neighbors don't hunt. So I don't know. We'll see. Keep working on that one.
Yeah. More to come for 2025 for sure. So, well, man,
yeah,
I feel like we could sit here all night and talk hunting for sure. But, at some point, unfortunately, I do have to wrap up the podcast, but
yeah, no, I got you, brother. I got you. I'm the same. I could sit and talk about it forever, but yeah, like I was telling Nick, I need to get y'all out and come sit in a tree with me and chase one of these Collin County bucks with me.
Man,
we need to plan that for next season. I can't make any promises. But
hey,
it is to be a good time.
I tell everybody I'm a real quiet cameraman, so
Yeah.
I'll come film for you. Not a problem. Well, man, thank you for your time this evening. Appreciate it. Always good to catch up with you and talk some whitetails. Thanks for coming on the show again.
Absolutely, brother. Appreciate you, man.
All right. For our guys and gals tuning in, thank you all for listening. We'll be back again with y'all next week for another Fall Obsession podcast. Catch you then.